February 27, 2026. That is the day NASA, America's space agency, said something out loud that upended 8 years of planning. Artemis III was supposed to be the mission that put Americans back on the moon. It will not land on the moon, not delayed, not scaled back, redesigned from the ground up. The mission carrying the weight of an entire generation's hopes just got rerouted, and almost nobody outside the space community noticed. Picture the plan as it stood for years. 4 astronauts. A rocket called the Space Launch System, SLS for short. A capsule called Orion. And somewhere near the moon's south pole, in craters that have not seen direct sunlight in over 2 billion years. NASA had already picked out candidate landing zones down there, 9 of them, with names like Slater Plain and de Gerlache Rim 2. That was Artemis III. That was the whole plan. 2 months earlier, in April, Artemis II had flown 4 astronauts on a loop around the moon and brought them home safely. It worked. It went well. So the next step, the obvious next step, was supposed to be simple. Land. That is what almost 8 years of planning assumed. Now picture the room where that plan quietly died. Not a failure, a choice. NASA's own safety watchdog, an independent panel of safety and engineering experts, looked at the mission 2 days before the announcement and started counting. First time docking a brand new lander. First time operating it with a live crew aboard. First time landing humans on hardware that had never once flown with a person inside it. All stacked into a single mission, 250,000 miles from the nearest garage. They did not like the math. Astronauts were already training for the surface version of this mission when the plan changed underneath them. Simulators built, timelines rehearsed. Then, in a single announcement, the mission they trained for stopped existing. So what is Artemis III now? NASA's administrator, Jared Isaacman, called it getting back to basics. "We've got to get back to basics," he said. SLS still launches Orion and 4 astronauts, but only into low Earth orbit, roughly the same neighborhood as the space station. Then Orion docks, for the first time ever, with an actual lunar lander. Not a mock-up, a real vehicle from Blue Origin, called Blue Moon Mark II. That maneuver has never been attempted, not once, by anyone, ever. Both spacecraft are already flying around Earth at roughly 17,500 miles an hour. That part is not the hard part. The hard part is closing the last stretch between them at only a few centimeters per second, slow enough to line up within centimeters, and not so much as bump the docking ring. Orion has never done this with a moon lander. Nobody has. There's a name for this kind of mission. Engineers call it a dress rehearsal. NASA has run one before. In March of 1969, Apollo 9 flew a lunar module into Earth orbit and practiced everything except the actual landing. 4 months later, Apollo 11 touched down. Artemis III is that same move, 57 years later, with a very different cast of characters and a lot more paperwork. Here is where it gets almost absurd. Blue Origin's lander launches first and just waits up there in orbit for weeks. Then comes Orion and the crew. They rendezvous, dock, and spend about 2 days connected, running system checks, actually climbing inside the lander to see how it feels. Then they undock and wait again, this time for SpaceX. Starship, the same rocket meant one day for Mars, launches its own moon lander version and docks with Orion for roughly a day of testing. 3 separate mega-rocket campaigns. 1 capsule, about 2 weeks total spent in orbit. Isaacman himself called it the most awe-inspiring coordination of heavy-lift rocket launches in history. Nobody at the agency is arguing with that description. And then there's the crew. Commander Randy Bresnik, a retired Marine colonel and test pilot, on his third trip to space. Mission specialist Frank Rubio, who already holds a record most people have never heard of. 371 days aboard the space station, the longest single spaceflight by an American ever logged. Mission specialist Andre Douglas, for whom this will be the very first time leaving Earth at all, on one of the strangest missions NASA has ever assembled. And in the pilot's seat, Luca Parmitano from the European Space Agency, ESA, the first time an ESA astronaut has ever been assigned to an Artemis mission. Decades of European hardware have quietly powered these capsules. Now, Europe finally gets a seat up front. There's a smaller reveal buried in the announcement, easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. NASA quietly canceled a planned upgrade to its rocket, something called the Exploration Upper Stage. Too many configurations, too much complexity, said the agency's own leadership. They're going back to something simpler and more standardized instead. Less impressive on paper, more likely to actually fly on schedule, which, this year especially, counts for a lot. The astronauts will also try on the new commercial lunar spacesuits for the first time, inside the capsule, in microgravity. They will not step outside. They will not touch the moon's surface. But they will find out if the suits move the way the engineers on the ground promised they would. Which brings up the question nobody at NASA can fully answer yet. Does any of this actually get humans back on the moon by 2028? Officially, yes. Artemis IV, maybe Artemis V too, both scheduled for that year. Both depending entirely on what Artemis III teaches everyone first. Unofficially, the honest answer is simpler. We don't know. We know the plan. We don't know if two commercial companies building moon landers on overlapping schedules will actually deliver on time. We don't know if the dockings will go smoothly, or if something in this long, untested chain of firsts breaks the whole sequence apart before it ever reaches the surface. Nobody landed on the moon last year. Nobody's landing this year either. The last human footprint on that surface still belongs to 1972, more than 50 years old. And it is going to stay that way for at least 2 more. 12 people have ever walked on the moon. 12 in all of human history. Every one of them got there in the space of 3.5 years, between 1969 and 1972. And then it just stopped. Nobody planned for the gap to last this long. It did anyway. So here's where it actually stands. The mission everyone assumed was the moon landing turned out to be something else entirely. A rehearsal, a docking test, 3 rockets and 1 capsule, playing an extremely expensive game of orbital tag so that the next crew doesn't have to learn everything at once, 250,000 miles from home. Maybe that's not the ending anyone expected going in. Maybe it's the more honest one. Keep looking up.